James Morgan sat in his luxury penthouse, staring at the diamond engagement ring in his hand. The same ring that had just been thrown back in his face by his sixth failed relationship this year. She was just like all the others, he whispered to himself, the city lights of Manhattan twinkling below him like the tears he refused to shed. How could a man who had everything feel so completely empty? The answer would come from the most unexpected place, a small diner on the edge of town and a waitress who would teach him the true meaning of wealth. If you've ever felt that finding genuine love seems impossible in today's world, this story will restore your faith. Like, subscribe, and join us on this emotional journey that proves sometimes the richest connections come when we have nothing left to give but ourselves. At 42, James Morgan had everything most people spent their lives chasing. The self-made tech entrepreneur had built his company from a college dorm room idea to a billion-dollar empire. His modern glass and steel penthouse overlooked Central Park, his garage housed vehicles worth more than most people's homes, and his investment portfolio grew faster than he could spend it. But the one thing James couldn't seem to acquire was authentic love. 6 years ago, his wife of 8 years, Victoria, had left him and their 5-year-old daughter, Emma. The divorce papers had arrived with a note that simply read, "I never signed up to be a mother." The money was nice, but not worth this. She had taken a generous settlement and disappeared to Europe, leaving James to raise their daughter alone. The betrayal had cut deep, but it was Emma who suffered most. Now 11, she was quiet and reserved, struggling to trust people after her mother's abandonment. James had thrown himself into being both mother and father, scaling back his work hours and making Emma the center of his universe. But he knew she needed more than just him in her life. "Daddy, when are you going to find someone who loves us?" Emma would ask occasionally, her innocent question piercing his heart. Each time, he promised her he was trying, but the truth was more complicated. Every relationship since Victoria had followed the same pattern. Women were drawn to his wealth, his status, his power. They said all the right things, played the perfect potential stepmother to Emma, until James began to see through the facade. Their interest in his daughter waned when he wasn't around. Their eyes lit up at expensive gifts more than at his words. Their love seemed directly proportional to his bank account. The latest breakup had been with Sophia, a model he'd been dating for 3 months. When he'd suggested they take a weekend trip to his cabin in Vermont, a rustic, simple place without the trappings of wealth, she'd laughed as if he were joking. Why would we go there when we could fly to Paris? When he'd insisted, explaining he wanted Emma to experience nature, Sophia had revealed her true colors, complaining about playing mommy to his baggage. That night, after tucking Emma into bed, James sat in his home office, swirling a glass of 30-year-old scotch. On his desk sat a framed photo of him and Emma at the beach, both smiling genuinely. Next to it was a picture of his parents, hard-working people who had raised him with nothing but love and values. They had passed away before seeing his success, but their lessons remained. "Money doesn't buy happiness, Jamie," his father used to say. "It just buys a more comfortable form of misery if you don't have the right people to share it with." In that moment, staring at his father's weathered face in the photograph, James had an epiphany. The problem wasn't that he couldn't find love, it was that his wealth made it impossible to know if the love was real. As long as potential partners knew about his fortune, he would never be certain if they wanted him or what he could provide. The solution came to him with startling clarity: he needed to date as a regular, middle-class single dad. No penthouse, no luxury car, no expensive restaurants. Just James Morgan, the man, not the millionaire. The next morning, James called his most trusted friend and attorney, Michael Chen. "You want to do what?" Michael asked incredulously after James explained his plan. "I want to date without anyone knowing I'm wealthy," James repeated. "I need to find someone who will love me and Emma for who we are, not what I can give them." Michael sighed. "And how exactly do you plan to hide the fact that you're one of New York's most eligible bachelors? Your face has been in Business Insider and Forbes." "I'll date outside my usual circles." No high society events, no charity galas. Just regular places where regular people meet. I'll say I'm a mid-level IT manager. Nothing flashy, nothing that would raise eyebrows. And the penthouse? The cars? Your lifestyle? James had thought this through. I'll use the apartment I keep downtown for visiting executives. It's nice but modest. I'll drive my old Honda that I keep for sentimental reasons. And I'll be careful about expenses, no lavish gifts, no extravagant dates. Michael looked skeptical but nodded. And Emma? She's old enough to accidentally reveal the truth. James smiled sadly. Emma understands more than you think. When I explained that I wanted to find someone who would love us for us, she immediately got it. She's been hurt too many times by women pretending to care about her. And so began James Morgan's double life. By day, he remained the powerful CEO, making decisions that affected thousands of employees and millions of customers. But by night and on weekends, he became just James, a hardworking IT manager and devoted father who lived in a comfortable but modest two-bedroom apartment in a middle-class neighborhood. His first few dates were disasters, but for entirely different reasons than before. Without his wealth as a buffer, James realized how rusty his actual dating skills were. Women seemed unimpressed by his fumbling attempts at conversation when he couldn't fall back on stories about exotic travel or celebrity encounters. "You seem nice," said one woman after an awkward dinner at a casual Italian restaurant, "but there's just no spark." James had nodded, thanked her for her honesty, and felt strangely liberated by the authentic rejection. 3 months and 14 failed dates later, James was beginning to question his experiment. He sat in a booth at Rosie's Diner, a small establishment far from his usual haunts, waiting for blind date number 15, a woman his dentist's receptionist had insisted would be perfect for him. When she didn't show up after 45 minutes, James accepted he'd been stood up. He sighed, pulling out his wallet to pay for the coffee he'd been nursing. "Rough night?" asked a voice that somehow managed to be both gentle and strong at the same time. James looked up to see his waitress, a woman about his age with warm brown eyes and a smile that seemed to reach something long dormant inside him. Her name tag read Abby. "Stood up," he admitted with a self-deprecating smile. Apparently being a single dad in IT isn't exactly catnip for the ladies. Abby laughed, a genuine sound that made her eyes crinkle at the corners. "Her loss. Anyone who can't see the value in a man who shows up and waits patiently isn't worth your time anyway." She refilled his coffee without being asked. "This one's on the house. Consider it a consolation prize." "Thank you," James said, surprised by the simple kindness. "But I should probably get home to my daughter. The babysitter charges extra after 9. Abby nodded understandingly. "How old is your daughter?" "Emma's 11. Going on 30, if you ask her." "That's a great age. Challenging, but great. I have a son who's 13. Every day is an adventure in parenting." For the first time in months, James found himself engaged in a conversation that felt effortless. They talked about the challenges of single parenting, exchanged stories about their children's most embarrassing public meltdowns, and discovered they shared a love of old science fiction movies. "I should really let you get back to work," James said eventually, noticing the diner had gotten busier. "Probably," Abby agreed, but made no move to leave. Instead, she hesitated, then said, "This is probably completely unprofessional, but would you maybe want to get coffee sometime? When I'm not working and you haven't been stood up?" James felt a warmth spread through his chest that had nothing to do with the coffee. "I'd like that very much." They exchanged numbers, and James left the diner feeling lighter than he had in years. On the drive back to his temporary apartment, he realized he hadn't once thought about his wealth or status during their entire conversation. Their first official date was at a small park where they watched their children play together. Emma and Abby's son, Tyler, hit it off immediately, bonding over a shared love of astronomy and a mutual disdain for their school's cafeteria food. "Tyler's father isn't in the picture?" James asked carefully as they sat on a bench watching the kids. Abby shook her head. "He left when I told him I was pregnant. Said he wasn't ready to be a father." She shrugged, but James could see the old pain in her eyes. "It was hard at first, but we've made it work. My parents help out when they can, and I've built a good life for us." "You're amazing," James said sincerely. "Working full-time, raising a son alone. I don't know how you do it." Abby smiled. "The same way you do, I imagine. One day at a time, with a lot of coffee and occasional breakdowns in the shower where the kids can't hear you cry." James laughed, recognizing the truth in her words. "That's exactly it." Over the next few weeks, they fell into an easy rhythm. They took the kids to museums on free admission days, had picnics in the park, and watched movies at each other's apartments. James was careful to maintain his middle-class facade, always conscious of what a normal IT manager's budget would allow. What amazed him most was how little money seemed to matter in their relationship. When his car broke down, actually just parked in a long-term garage, Abby didn't hesitate to offer rides or suggest they take the subway. When he mentioned he couldn't afford to take Emma on an expensive summer vacation, Abby enthusiastically helped plan an affordable camping trip that both families could enjoy together. For the first time, James felt seen for who he truly was, not what he owned or what he could provide. The feeling was intoxicating. But as their relationship deepened, the weight of his deception began to trouble him. He wasn't lying about who he was as a person, but he was hiding a significant part of his life. Each time Abby shared another struggle, worrying about Tyler's college fund, picking up extra shifts to cover unexpected medical bills, carefully budgeting for groceries, James felt a stab of guilt. For months into their relationship, as they sat on Abby's worn couch after the kids had gone to bed, she took his hand and looked at him seriously. "James, I need to tell you something," she said, her voice uncharacteristically nervous. His heart sank. Had she discovered the truth? Was this the end? "I'm falling in love with you," she said instead, her eyes vulnerable but determined. "And it terrifies me because I promised myself I'd never depend on anyone again after Tyler's father left. But you're different. You're kind and genuine, and you see me, really see me. Not just as a mother or a waitress, but as a woman with dreams and flaws and everything in between." James felt tears prick his eyes. "Abby, You don't have to say it back," she interrupted quickly. "I just needed you to know where I stand. I'm all in, James. Whatever challenges come our way, money problems, work stress, parenting issues, I want to face them together." In that moment, James knew he couldn't continue the charade. Abby deserved the truth, even if it meant losing her. "There's something I need to tell you too," he said quietly. "Something I should have told you from the beginning." Confusion crossed her face as he explained everything: his company, his wealth, his experiment in dating without the influence of money. As he spoke, her expression shifted from confusion to shock to something he couldn't quite read. When he finished, the silence between them felt endless. "Say something," he finally pleaded. "Anything." Abby stood up and walked to the window, her back to him. "I don't even know what to think right now," she said, her voice tight. "You've been lying to me this entire time." "Not about who I am," James insisted, moving to stand behind her. "Just about my financial situation. Everything else, how I feel about you, about us, that's all real." She turned to face him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "But don't you see? You didn't trust me enough to know the whole you. You decided from the beginning that I might be the kind of person who would only want you for your money. That's not. And what about all those times I insisted on paying my share? Or when I gave you rides because I thought you couldn't afford car repairs? Do you have any idea how humiliating this feels?" James felt sick. He had been so focused on protecting himself from being used that he hadn't considered how his deception might hurt someone genuinely caring. "I'm sorry," he said, the words woefully inadequate. "I've been hurt so many times, Abby. I watched women pretend to love Emma, pretend to care about me, all while eyeing my bank account. I just wanted something real. And lying was your solution?" She shook her head. "I need you to leave. I need time to think." James nodded, respecting her request even as his heart broke. At the door, he turned back. "For what it's worth, I'm falling in love with you too. The real you. And I hope someday you can forgive me for not being brave enough to show you the real me from the start." The next week was the longest of James's life. He threw himself into work and parenting, trying to ignore the constant ache in his chest. Emma, perceptive as always, noticed his sadness. "Did you and Abby have a fight?" she asked one evening as they ate dinner in their real penthouse, which felt emptier than ever. "Something like that," James admitted. "I made a mistake, and now I'm not sure she'll forgive me." Emma considered this. "Is it because you didn't tell her we're rich?" James nearly choked on his water. "How did you know about that?" Emma rolled her eyes in that preteen way that made her look so much older. "Dad, I'm 11, not stupid. You made me promise not to talk about our real house or your company or anything. Plus, you made me leave my iPad with the diamond case at home. It was pretty obvious." James couldn't help but laugh at his daughter's perception. "You're right. And yes, that's why Abby's upset. I wasn't honest with her." Emma nodded sagely. "You should apologize. And maybe buy her flowers. But not too expensive ones, or she might get mad again." Out of the mouths of babes, James thought. 3 days later, he gathered his courage and went to Rosie's diner during Abby's shift. The lunch rush was just ending, and she looked tired but beautiful as she wiped down a table. She stiffened when she saw him but didn't walk away. "5 minutes," he said. "That's all I'm asking." Abby glanced at her manager, who nodded, then led James to a booth in the corner. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," James began. "About why I did what I did, and why it was wrong. I was so afraid of being used that I ended up using you, testing you without your knowledge or consent. That wasn't fair, and I'm deeply sorry." Abby's expression remained guarded, but she didn't interrupt. "The irony is," he continued, "in trying to find someone who would love me regardless of money, I created a situation where money was still the central issue. Just in reverse." "It wasn't just about the money, James," Abby said quietly. "It was about trust. Relationships need trust to survive. I know. And I violated that trust before we even had a chance to build it." He took a deep breath. "I don't expect you to forgive me right away, or maybe ever. But I want you to know that these past months have been the most genuine of my life. For the first time, I wasn't James Morgan, CEO, or James Morgan, millionaire. I was just James, a man falling in love with an extraordinary woman who made me laugh, challenged me, and saw me in ways no one else ever has." Abby's eyes softened slightly. "I meant what I said before. I was falling in love with you. But I don't know if I can get past this." "I understand," James said, his heart heavy. "But if you're willing, I'd like the chance to start over. Completely honest this time. No more secrets, no more tests." "And what would that look like?" she asked, a hint of curiosity breaking through her reserve. "It would look like me asking you on a proper first date. Taking you to dinner at a place I actually can afford.